So, hey, yesterday I got to interview my friend Colette, who I've known for years, and she and I have done some events together, and I just love the way she looks at the world. Anyway, I think that you're really going to enjoy this interview. All right, here's Colette. Here we go. Hey, Colette, how are you?
Good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome, and thank you very much for agreeing to do this interview.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah. So, why don't we start by having you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Okay. I'm Colette Chavez Walker. And Collette is a French name because it has one L. And Chavez Walker, blending mom and dad's last name. And so who am I? I'm a human being. And then we stick on the other labels. I'm a female, multi-ethnic person who lives in America. And that's the gist of who I am.
Awesome. You are also a very awesome human being. You are in the realm of healer.
Yep. So I am a trained licensed massage therapist, and my massage, I base it on fascial work, and I also base it on my understanding of Chinese medicine from the standpoint of let the body do what it's born to do and only do outside interference to try to re-stimulate the body to remember what it may have forgotten to do.
That's an interesting way of putting that. I really like that.
Thank you. And currently, because of COVID and my health issues, I'm unemployed.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, but hopefully all of that will turn around at some point in the future.
Yeah. Well, and I guess because you had asked me at one point, like, what do I do for the community? And I was like, well, at this point, I don't do anything. And I started thinking about it, and I'm like, well, no, that's a lie because I've been sharing my healing journey. So I think what I do for the community is serve as an example of how to journey into discovering your internal healer, and then also how to combine science with spirituality to help you heal.
Yeah, and this is the point that made me go, ooh, I have to interview you here. So tell me how you came to that.
Well, it took a while. So I started off originally being more scientific, working in the dental field. And then as I was working in the dental field, I was also starting to explore my spirituality and getting more into more of the esoteric way of doing things. I kind of like tarot was my gateway into my spirituality. And I went in for a reading at one of the local shops, and I got introduced to a woman from Wales. And she was just so fascinating to me and so cool. And we started talking, and she recommended some books. And then she was like, hey, I'm doing a class. And it was on Wicca. And so I went and sat with her and started studying with her. And then that led me to another group. And from there, it was like, oh, this earth-based spirituality, I think is for me. But as I explored that, it didn't fit with my career path at the time. And so gradually, I found that I needed to move away from my career path. And as it happened, my health started becoming a challenge, and I had to figure out what was going on with me. So I got the advice from a mentor who said, just put it out to the universe. put in your resignation, give them a month, and then sit with yourself and see where the universe takes you. And so the universe took me into massage school. And I was like, oh, this is great. I can totally be myself. Because in massage, everybody kind of thinks you're a little, off the beaten path anyways. So it was like, oh, I can freely be myself. I can freely explore my spirituality. And in that process, towards the end of my first semester in massage school, I started finding out what was going on with my health. And so massage pretty much saved my life because it got me back in and said, hey, I am having pain. We really need to figure this out now. And that led to diagnosis of having breast cancer. So from that, it led me to, I needed to find a job at the same time while I was in school. And the only place that would hire me was a naturopathic clinic, because everybody else was saying I had too much education, too much experience. And, all I wanted to do was bag groceries. And they're like, no. So this naturopathic clinic hired me as a medical assistant. And that's what got me into more of the Chinese medicine kind of outlook on things. And they introduced me to acupuncture and looking at the world from like a homeostatic kind of perspective, more so than let's get you into balance. It was like, no, where are you off a little bit? Where are you off to the extreme? And can we bring you back to your own center? And then, and then getting the diagnosis, it was like I was in the perfect place at the perfect time, and they supported me. And that got me through dental school. And so my my massage school, and massage and my cancer treatments went hand in hand. And then when I graduated, by the time I graduated, I was in remission. And so that's where we went. In that process, I got led away from doing the Wicca and started having some experiences where my ancestors were calling to me, asking me to remember some other parts of myself, which led me into shamanic practitioner training, which led me into a vision quest, which led me into Native American spirituality, which is part of my ancestral heritage. And when I hit that, I was like, oh, this is more it for me. And so all of that together kind of makes up who I am today. And then knowing you as well, we kept connected and you helped me get ordained. So I have the whole package now. I've got the scientific background. I've got the physical manual manipulation part of it, plus, the spiritual aspect, and the way, because I've gone through so many different transitions in my spirituality. So when I was younger, my father's mother got me baptized in the Baptist church. So I'm all covered there, whatever happens, I'm covered. And then I also explored Catholicism, because that's another part of my Hispanic heritage. And then I've also looked into the African coastal spirituality with, Oshun and those elemental spirits. And after doing a journey to say, I've got a lot going on inside of me. How do I bring this all together? And my ancestors did all these different things. Spirit, how do I make sense of all this? And Spirit basically said, break it down. And what do they all have in common? If you take it back to when your ancestors, anywhere globally, where did they start? And for me, they all started at some kind of indigenous place, as we all do. And so I realized, well, the basics of all of my ancestors was their connection to earth, to nature, and to the stars. And so now I just kind of consider my spirituality nature-based.
Yeah, that's a lot to put into one
Right?
package. Yeah. But it all makes sense when you boil it down that way. It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of answered the next question, which is how long have you been doing this, through this whole journey?
Yeah.
And how it has affected your life.
Yes. So how long have I been on this spiritual path? Probably since the day I was born.
Right.
Right. And how has it affected me? I think without my spiritual path, I probably wouldn't still be in physical form. Because even more recently, where I got really back into, I've got to go internally and start talking to the inner healer and say, hey, what's going on? What am I missing? What can I learn? Because after being in remission for 14 years, the cancer came back. And, I went through a little bit of that, like, well, shoot, I thought I prayed on this. I thought I got the message from spirit that I was cured. Well, what I had prayed on was, I no longer want breast cancer. I don't want cancer in my breast. So when it came back and we did all the retesting and re-imaging, it was like, well, there is no cancer in either one of your breasts. Where it decided to flow into was your bones. So when I finally figured out what was going on, one of the oncology surgeons basically said, well, you know how to read x-rays. Let's look at this together. What do you see? And I was like, oh, holy cow. That is a ton of cancer. Like, where's the rest of my hip? Where's my ilium? It was pretty much over 50% gone. And so he said, well, at this point, I think I'm going to send you to somebody else who's a little bit more skilled with this than I am. But I think you might be looking at losing your leg. And I was like, okay. Went to the parking lot, composed myself, and said, well, I think I can lose a leg as long as I can keep my life. So let's look at, how to get back in remission and see how I can live life without a leg. Well, I posted that on Facebook, and a woman in my spiritual group read it, messaged me and said, call me. I called her and she said, so I just read what you wrote. Who wrote that? Was that really you? And I was like, yeah, I wrote that. She's like, do you believe that you're going to lose your leg? And I said, well, not really. And she's like, then go back into who you are as a spirit being and figure out what you really want. So do you believe you have cancer, first of all? And I said, well, I didn't want to believe it, but I can't deny it. Yes, the cancer is back. But no, I don't believe I'm going to die from this right now, because we're going to die from something. But I don't think I'm ready to die yet. And I don't think I'm going to lose my leg. And she's like, well, then get your tools together and figure out how to get what you want. And so I started visualizing that there was this mesh around my ilium, my hip, and that I was giving love and gratitude to the cancer, because the first time it worked, that I wasn't going to fight the cancer. I was going to see it as a teacher, and I was going to listen to it, learn from it, love it, and thank it. So I kept doing that. So I would send love and allow the cancer to hear the gratitude and let it slip away, because I'm like, okay, I'm hearing what you're saying, so you can go now. And then I would envision replacing healthy, functional bone. So I kept doing that. And then I went to what my group does, a form of what we call Sundance. And there's a tree that you pray at and you go to. And so I went to the tree to pray and have my group pray with me and over me. And when I went there again, it was, I'm praying for the cancer to leave my leg so that I can walk and be able to work again and be able to hike again. And as that happened, I gradually started to notice that things were getting better. And I went back to the surgeon again. And now the surgeon was like, it went from, over time, it went from, you're going to lose your leg, to, if you can get enough of the cancer out of the way and grow enough bone, you can do a hip replacement, to, wow, you just healed yourself out of a hip replacement. I can't do better for you than you've already done for yourself, especially if you want to do, at the time I was doing Thai yoga or Thai massage, which is like yoga. And he said, well, if you're going to do that and I do a hip replacement, you are going to risk dislocating pretty much every day. So I don't see that as feasible. So I'm like, well, then let's not do the surgery. And then on top of that, he was like, and at this point, because you're saying you don't have any pain, then it's going to be an elective surgery. And I was like, well, I can't afford elective surgery, so I guess we're done. And so I got off the crutches and the walker, and now I'm fully walking on my own. And here I am. So again, my spirituality and science together, I healed an issue. Looking back, I should have said, I want to have the cancer gone for good this time, as well as being able to walk and other things. But, you do what you do in the moment, you learn from it, and you move on.
Right. And, I think there's also a piece of this that you can expect to learn something from it.
Yes.
And, I don't know if you can expect it to leave you alone forever.
Exactly. Because the other thing that came up in it was when I'd gotten the diagnosis, I was hanging out with a filmmaker who had done a couple of documentaries. And so I asked, hey, I would like to kind of do a documentary to follow my journey this time, because I didn't do it the first time. And I said, because I really want to show that, if you connect with your inner healer, there's a lot you can do for yourself. But I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm not just going to go that route. I am going to do Western medicine plus naturopathic medicine plus all my spiritual stuff. And around that time, there was a well-known monk who had just had, I think, a stroke. I can't remember his name right now. And so she had been following him. And she's like, well, I don't know about us healing ourselves. I really don't think that's possible for humans, because if somebody like this monk couldn't prevent himself from having a stroke and immediately healing from it, how can the rest of us expect to? And in that moment, it was like spirit came through me and said, I think we don't understand healing the same way. Because I said, well, possibly he's going through a form of healing because he's showing the rest of us something that we didn't know before. And if he hadn't had the stroke, we probably wouldn't learn what he's going to teach us. So for me, healing doesn't always mean that you're going to get a cure. Healing doesn't always mean that you're not going to die from whatever came up. And I really started to understand that my illness wasn't just my illness. It was also how other people interacted with me. Because the other reason she chose not to collaborate with me to do the documentary was she had lost someone to cancer. So for her to do that, if my outcome was not what she was hoping for, she didn't think she would be able to complete the documentary in a good way. So I was like, okay, that's fine. But for me, that was a major lesson that, okay, every time I talk to somebody, how they respond to me is not going to just be about my illness, but it's going to be about how they view my illness. And so that's an interesting thing. So again, when you asked me to do this, I was like, well, I don't really help the community, but just being who I am, talking about my journey, I'm an example to the community of what can be possible.
Exactly. I think that is invaluable these days.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's such an amazing story that, we have to put it out there.
And it's amazing too. It's like going through it and talking to people to really come to terms with how much, especially in the Western world, we have given up our power and we look outside of ourselves for so much. Like we doubt ourselves so often. So we defer to the expert. Like, instead of deferring to the expert within ourselves, we defer to somebody else and we defer to a human being for the answers. And they don't always have it,
Right. And sometimes they like to give answers because it puts them in power.
Exactly. And some people, like, as I go through this and understand, like, having metastatic, they say you're never going to be cured again. So I'm in the system going every month. And so I start to realize too, like, some people go into the medical field to be heroes, right? They don't go in to take care of the person and listen to what the person needs. They go into it so they can tell other people, look what good I'm doing in the world, And so that also got me thinking of how often do we do things and do things persist because we're trying to find our purpose, right? Because, when I walk into the oncology department and I see so many people in the waiting room, it's like, on the one hand, you think, wow, these oncologists are pretty successful. But the only way they're successful and the only way they're following their purpose is because people have cancer. So what if their purpose was not to help so many people with cancer, but really, really do whatever they can to get the resources to treat people individually and really look at, like, where did your cancer come from? Was it from a spiritual disconnect? Was it from a mental disconnect? Was it from emotional disconnect? Or was it from a physical disconnect? And in that physical, was it because we've put so much chemicals into the environment and that's how your body's responding? Or is it some combination of all of that? So it's like the journey just keeps making me more cerebral and thinking about more things and questioning everything.
Isn't a bad thing.
No, which is really interesting too, because it's like, when you tell somebody that you have cancer, it's like, oh, a big deal. When you tell somebody you have metastatic cancer, which is, most people will call it terminal, right? Then everybody's like, oh my gosh, right? This is awful. And I'm like, is it really awful? I don't know, because I'm learning a lot and I'm still here and I'm still figuring out how to be here. So I don't think it's that bad, but then COVID hits too. And that puts a whole other layer on things, right? And now you're looking at, you need support, you want support. And my whole thing was, I want to make memories with people. I want to go out and do things with people, right? And so in one fell swoop, I went from going back into work after being off for 4 months because of all the initial treatments and everything, starting to rebuild my practice to boom, we get a stay-at-home order, close everything down. And then as the science was coming in, I'm like, I'm not risking this. This is a numbers game. I don't know who's coming in. And then you find out about the asymptomatic. And I'm like, I'm not going to die of this while I'm trying to stay alive from cancer. So I'm going to stay isolated, right? But at the same time, it was like, well, where's my pod? You know, who can be isolated with me? And because I'm completely single, no kids, no partner, it really got harder. And you start seeing how people really view this us and them. And it's my pod, my family. And if you're not in it, you're not safe for me. And so that was like, wow, isn't this interesting, this human dynamic of what we do when we feel unsafe?
Yeah, that is quite the trick, isn't it? How not to circle the wagons like that. Yeah. Wow. Hadn't thought about that. So, what about your mental health? How has your spiritual path affected your mental health?
Well, again, interestingly, right? So I always internally try to figure things out and go back and forth. So with the isolation, you start realizing, I don't think I'm doing very well. I think I'm depressed. I think I'm anxious, and then you start questioning, well, why am I depressed? Why am I anxious? And it's like, oh, well, because maybe I should have tried harder to build a family instead of being this career woman and doing everything on my own. Like that was my driving force. I'm a strong, independent woman. I don't need anybody to take care of me. I can make my own money. I've got my own business going. And then boom, COVID. And it's like, oh shit, right? And then gradually it led me to, okay, maybe I should do a soul retrieval. I must be missing some pieces. So you do that and soul pieces come back and it's like, where's the core issue? And so then that takes me back to, well, maybe there's something connected with my childhood. And you start looking at trauma. And then it comes up like, oh, my desire to be so independent is actually a trauma response. And so then I have to work through that. And as I started doing that, I start feeling lighter because now you got an answer and you can look at things and you can look at how one aspect of your life affects all of your relationships. And so then I start looking at, how am I repeating this in other aspects of my life? And because of having the cancer and not knowing how much time I have, it's like, do I really want to waste time trying to prove to certain people that I'm a good friend, or I'm a good this or a good that? And it's like, no, not really, because I don't think the energy exchange is equal. And so I only have so much energy as I'm dealing with the side effects and all that. So I'm like, if it takes a lot for somebody to make space for me, it's not worth it right now. And that started helping my mental health because then I wasn't trying so hard to be this good friend and trying to mold myself into what these other people wanted or needed of me. I had to look inside. What do you need? What do you want? What do you want from a friend? And then the phrase, which most of us usually hate, and it usually comes up when you're dating somebody and it's time to break up and the person says, it's not you, it's me. And I realized that is one of the most honest and kindest phrases anybody can say. Because really, if I decide I don't want to be in this friendship, in this intimate relationship or whatever, it has nothing to do with the other person. It has to do with how am I reacting to that person? What do I feel my needs are? And are they being met by that person? Right? So that's all on me, not them. And if I decide it's not working, it has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with what's not working in my own life. And so, yeah. So the spirituality really helped ease my mental health and get me off of that little hamster wheel of, oh, I'm depressed and oh, I'm anxious. Because I had to look at that of like, what does that really mean? Because depression and anxiety, that's an energy block, right? So if I can remove the block and get the flow going.
Yeah. Okay. So talk to me about that energy flow. What is give me a metaphor for that. Give me a concept to wrap my brain around. What do you mean by energy flow?
Wow, that's deep. So I guess the best way I can look at it is like a tree. And I imagine that I have energetic roots, right, that go into the earth. So the flow starts with the energy from the earth coming up to me and me understanding what that vibration is. And if I can connect into that vibration, well, I'm going to still be here on earth because I'm going to be tethered to it. Then I bring that energy up into my body and it kind of like bounces around and goes, you're a little off on this area. This area is really flowing with me, you know, and start exploring how the energy is working within my own system. And then like the tree, you've got your branches and your leaves going out into the atmosphere. And for me, then my energy keeps going out to the universe, to the stars, and how that works and comes back into me. So it's this multi-dimensional energy flow that, you know, if you're into astrology, you understand how the stars and the planets affect you. And if you're into earth-based energies, you understand how the earth's energy affects you. So we come from some source that we've yet to figure out what that ultimate source is. You know, some people call it God. Some people just call it source energy, life force energy. And then for whatever reason, our energy decides it wants to materialize on a certain planet. And for us, we decided to come here to Earth. And that's why we connect to Earth energy to keep us tethered here. And when we decide we want to go back to source energy, we disconnect from the Earth. And so when we disconnect from the Earth too much, that's when something in our system starts going wonky, in my opinion, because we're telling Earth and we're telling ourselves, I'm ready to leave manifested physical form and go back into pure energy.
Okay, that was well put. Thank you very much. I'm glad you threw that out there with the tree metaphor, because now it makes a lot more sense. So let's wrap it up with the last final question here, which
Alrighty.
is, what is your advice to any seekers who may be on the path? Question
yourself first and foremost. Really go in and ask yourself, who am I? Who do I want to be? What do I want out of life? And then really, when you start meeting people, sit and feel the energy between you and that person and see what really starts to resonate repeatedly. Because sometimes you can have a false read. You think you're supposed to be with that person, and you think you're resonating, but actually what you're resonating on is from that trauma energy. And so it's something that you don't realize that you're drawn to them just because it's familiar. And that doesn't always mean it's good for you. So you have to understand the difference between working from your trauma and working from your soul energy. There's a different resonance and a different vibration when you hit the people that are there as your soul connection. So be patient with yourself, question yourself, and be still and silent enough to notice the different changes in your energy.
Yeah, I think that's also very good advice to tack onto the end of this awesome interview. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you for putting all this in a format that I can share with others, because hanging out with you and getting to know your perspective on things has even taught me a few things. So
thank you.
Yeah, this is why we mesh so well. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.